Hi, and welcome to the Brookdale Visiting Writers Series. My name is Suzanne Parker. I'm part of the faculty here at Brookdale Community College, and I'm also the director of the Visiting Writers Series. Today, I am thrilled to be talking with Nahid Rachlin, who is a memoirist, a fiction writer, and a short story writer. Her most recent two books are Jumping Over Fire, which is a novel, and also Persian Girls, which is her memoir of living in Iran and coming to the United States. So, Nahid, welcome to this show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Persian Girls is just a wonderful book, wonderful book.
Thanks.
And I know that it was, I read that someone said if you were to read one book about Iran, this is the book that you should read. And I think NPR nominated or identified it as one of the best 4 books of 2006.
Yeah, I was very happy to
to
hear that.
Great. It's a wonderful book. It's a memoir, but it reads like a novel, I found. Could you maybe tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, I wrote this memoir after having written all the books of fiction. In the back of my mind, I always wanted to write this memoir, but I really needed distance from it because in a memoir, you don't have that extra barrier that you create calling it fiction, even though some of the material in my fiction also is autobiographical. Not directly, but some of it anyway. But so it was hard to write it on many different levels, partly because I was dealing with very upsetting, painful subjects, and partly also because I actually needed distance to be able to shape it in such a coherent form for the reader so they get something out of it. So it's interesting when you say it has a novelistic feeling because I wanted to engage the reader as if they are reading a novel, in that I wanted the material of my own life, directly from my life and about my sister's life, to make it interesting to the reader as well as I was writing it.
Well, I definitely think that's successful because I mean, I pretty much read it in one sitting.
Thanks,
I couldn't
great.
put it down. It's the novel, or I'm calling it a novel. The memoir itself is centered around, in essence, your search and your relationship for your sister, Pari.
Right.
Could you tell people a little bit about what the memoir itself is about?
Yes. Well, first of all, it starts from the time of the late Shah to present-day Iran as I go back and forth in this search for my sister Pari after she fell down the stairs and died. And to me, it seems mysterious, even though it was clearly not murder because she was with her friends. But because she had been depressed towards the end of her life, I really wanted to know what happened. But before that, part of my closeness to her, that was very extremely close, was because of a strange circumstances of my own life, in that I was adopted by my aunt from my mother when I was 6 months old. And then my father came and took me back by force when I was 9 years old. I mean, when I went to live with my birth family, I hardly knew them. I had seen them. They lived very far apart from my aunt. It was a plane ride. And I just saw them in the background. I didn't pay much attention to them. They didn't pay much attention to me either.
So you were 9 years old at this time?
I was 9 years old when my father came and took me away.
Had you seen your mother, or?
I had. She used to come and visit her sisters, but she never paid much attention to me. Like, she didn't treat me as if I was her child that she had given away to her sister. It was more that I was one of her nieces, lumped in, because all my other aunts had a lot of children, and they were all around. And so I didn't pay enough attention to why I was given away, why any of that. That search came later on when I was older. But when I came to live with my birth family, because I hadn't known them, I wasn't happy with them, and my mother was very cold to me anyway. When I arrived there, I became very close to my sister Pari. And part of it was that, and another part was that temperamentally, we were both very rebellious against traditional roles set for us in a culture that really was very limiting for young girls. She wanted to be an actress, and I wanted to be a writer. And both of those really were frowned upon by our family and society at large. And so she and I became very close because of that also. And even though she was 4 years older than me, we still became very close. And unfortunately, though, she got trapped in a very bad arranged marriage, and none of her goals for independence became possible. Whereas I struck out and I came to the United States and I followed basically my dreams. And that was always very upsetting, very painful to me that Patty wasn't strong enough to strike, you know, be as rebellious as I was.
It seems in the book there's so much pressure to get married. And to, you know, act in a way that is deemed appropriate. That, you know, I found that heartbreaking to see, you know, how your sister, you know, in the end, in a way, pleased your parents.
That's right.
By doing this.
And I think since I was writing the memoir, obviously I was constantly trying to figure out why did Patty get trapped and I didn't. And I think it's because my aunt gave me a lot of strength that my mother didn't give to my sister Patty or any of her children maybe. Because I was an only child, and the focus of my aunt's attention and love, and she really lavished a lot of that on me. I was very strong, really. And when I came to live with my parents, I was able not to depend on their love or an approval that much. I was able to strike out like more seriously. Whereas Patty, even though she had conflicts with them, and she definitely wanted to go her own way, she didn't have anybody else who had provided. She didn't have another mother or another father or anything. And so she also at the same time wanted some approval from them. So she couldn't go all the way, completely rebel. And that really has very harsh consequences for a young girl to really rebel. And I just managed, though, to get myself be sent to the United States and didn't have to go with those traditional roles.
It seems interesting to me, though, in the book, you know, very much you're wanting to get away, you know, to break these roles, to either, you know, go back with your aunt who you love so much, or just to get out, to get to the United States. But when you do get to the United States, there's a sense of displacement, of not quite being able to settle in or fit in here. I mean, this place that you've dreamed about turns out not to be all that it seems to be dreamed of. And I noticed also in Jumping Over Fire that this seems to be a major theme in your work, this sense of place and finding a sense of self in place.
Yeah, I always felt that, obviously. First, when I was living with my aunt, I felt very close to her, very happy, but at some point, I started feeling a little misplaced there when my mother came to visit. And I think I have that in the memoir. At the same time, one of the visits, my aunt was talking about how a blind child, a woman in the neighborhood had a blind child, and she had abandoned the child in a doorway of a house. When I heard that, it was like a sudden, I was so shaken up. I kept thinking maybe there was something wrong with me that my mother gave me away. That was the first time really that I began to question, why was I given away? And so I became aware that my parents had a totally different way of lifestyle from my aunt. So I started thinking, right from then, I just started feeling a little you know, like didn't have 100% sense of belonging anymore after I heard that. And then when I came to live with my parents, I certainly didn't feel I belonged with them either, because I hadn't lived with them until then. My mother had all these other children to take her attention away. And it was just a different life in a different town. And so again, I just was wondering, where do I really belong? When I came to college, my parents forced me to go to this all-women's college to be near one of my brothers who was going to medical school in St. Louis. And they didn't give me any other choice. They said, if you don't go to this college, that's it. And this college, unfortunately, was so provincial. It wasn't anything like the America in my mind I had dreamed about. It was so limiting. We had to sign in and out every minute we left the dormitory. We have to go to church, no matter what our religion, twice a week. People hadn't even heard of other religions sometimes. They were so out, you know, like they weren't very exposed to anything. They had real these strange ideas about other cultures and religions. A lot of them had been very sheltered, Southern Belle type girls. And so it was a very strange place for a foreign student. It wasn't like coming to the East Coast where there are hundreds
Eventually you escaped to New York.
Eventually I escaped to New York. And I finally now I feel a sense of belonging. I feel I belong to New York City.
Do you?
Yeah, because everybody else has somewhat of the same feelings as I have.
True.
I mean, even if they come from small towns from the United States, they feel a little like I do, that they didn't belong to where they came from.
Do you think of New York as an international city?
Right. And it's a unique city. It's just like a place of its own, like a country of its own. So I feel a belonging there just because of that.
It's such an emotional book. I'm wondering, has your family read it?
Well, my brothers and nephews and nieces who live in the United States who know English have read it. In Iran, no one has read it. The ones who don't know English, also it hasn't been translated. None of my books have. They never pass censorship.
I was wondering if it would pass a censor.
At different times, different people have tried to get one of the books published, and they never pass the censorship.
6 books and not one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's that. I would think that would make me sad.
Well, even if they did publish it, though, they would completely make it into a different book. So much would have to be cut out of it that it wouldn't be the same book anymore. It would be impossible to do it.
So you wouldn't even want that?
I don't even want it, because it would be like a different book.
Has it been translated into other languages?
Yeah, in Dutch, Portuguese, German, Lebanese. Great. I think there is going to be a French translation.
Oh, wonderful.
And a Spanish translation, I think.
Which has to be nice. As you said, it just came out in paperback.
Yeah.
I have the hardcover, but it's come out
it came out in paperback in January this year, just a couple of months ago.
Great. Well, you have many more books that you've written. We're going to take a short break, but then when we come back, we will talk more with Nahid Rachlin, who's the author of Persian Girls and the novel Jumping Over Fire.
I'm Sky Rubel. My major is communications. I really like the softball program at Brookdale, and when I talked to Bo, he convinced me to play. Being home is not a bad thing for me, and I like the teachers at Brookdale. Everybody's they work with you, they want to help you. It's not like they just teach and that's it. They like to get to know you, they like to work with you if you have a problem with something and everything like that. I'm Sky, and you're watching Brookdale Television.
Does peace really have a chance within our lifetime? At Rotary, we believe it does. We've created programs at universities around the world dedicated solely to teaching peace to a new generation. There's a new symbol for peace. Rotary.
My name is Mike Vigiano. My major is criminal justice. I'm a student athlete. I play for the men's basketball team. I came to Brookdale because I was at home in Marlboro all the time, and I figured this is a great school to go to because it's right here and I can commute back and forth and have a job and also play for the men's basketball team at the same time. Well, the coach is great, the team is great. We got a great season going for us. Practice all the time. It's getting me in good shape, so I'm also able to do good at school because it's only 2 hours of practice a day, and I can focus on my schoolwork as well. I've learned a lot playing basketball at Brookdale. I've learned it's more of a team game than in high school where it was just based on a few players. Here, all 5 of us have to go on the court and perform every time at our best. Going to school at Brookdale, the campus is great. New Jersey is a great place to be. The weather changes, so when it starts to get nice out during the spring, I love coming to the campus. It's really nice out, walking through, seeing everyone. A lot of people are friendly here. Teachers are friendly, so it's a great school to go to. After I graduate Brookdale, I want to become a firefighter, so I hope I can take my career and become a successful firefighter after Brookdale. My name is Mike. I'm a future firefighter, and you're watching Brookdale TV.
Hi, and welcome back to the Brookdale Visiting Writers Series. I'm talking with Nahid Rachlin, who is the author of Jumping Over Fire and the recently out in paperback Persian Girls as well. So welcome back, Nahid.
Thank you.
Welcome. Before the break, we were talking about censorship and your family, having read or not read the book. One of the things I was thinking about is there have been a lot of Iranian memoirs published in the U.S. recently. Right. Is this a trend that you see? Do you think this is going to have an impact?
Well, I think what happened about suddenly these memoirs being published, because these writers never wrote, like I was writing fiction for many years, and then I wrote the memoir. I think what happened is that this is purely speculation on my part. I think after reading Lolita in Tehran was such a big success and it was on the bestseller list, publishers started taking more chances publishing memoirs by Iranian women. I mean, a lot of these Iranian women might have written a memoir like that, say 10 years ago, they may never have gotten into print.
I see.
Because publishers often go by what trends are doing well. And that was, I think, a breakthrough actually for Iranian women's trend of writing memoir.
So we should be thanking Lolita
Yes.
for that.
Yes, exactly. I don't consider myself as part of that package because I had been writing for so many years before Iran became timely and before any of these things. So, but I think this new trend you see could be attributed to that, partly anyway.
Well, I think about, reading these books, your novels as well as the memoir, I learned things, were informative to me. Do you find that you have a conscious desire to maybe correct some misconceptions or
Actually,
inform people in your work?
I'm not quite conscious of it, but it definitely probably, I am influenced by a lot of the fact that people misunderstand so many things, that when I start writing, it naturally, like, as if I'm correcting that misconception, like I'm guiding people through the right path without thinking about it. Because, it's part of life. Like, I absorb people's observations. Like, for instance, I get a lot of emails because my website is so easy to find and my email is on the website. So anyway, just yesterday I got this email from this man living in Texas, having read Married to a Stranger, one of my novels, which is set under the Shah actually, not under the new regime. These two are, but not that one. So anyway, he's in the book, the woman has to get permission from her husband to be able to travel. And he said, he wrote in his email, the reason he was writing to me is, he said, well, I thought getting permission from your husband is something that just happened with the Islamic Revolution. Whereas in your book, you are saying you had to get permission even under the Shah's regime. The truth is that's how it was. You had to get, things weren't that good under the Shah for women either. People, because the Shah was friendly with the United States, people weren't, he wasn't so exposed as some of the things he did or the attitudes in Iran and laws which were so repressive for women. It's not this sudden Islamic revolution that changed things that were wonderful for women. It wasn't like that at all, as you see in my Persian Girls. So anyway, so there are a lot of misconceptions that, I'm hearing it in these emails I get, like this was one example.
About that. Yeah.
And he really wanted to know. He said, please, if you have a minute, could you explain this to me? So it seems like a lot of people are very curious about Iran.
Well, I think with everything that's going on in the Middle East right now, I think that's, there's a desire for clarity and for these stories to be told. Now that as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, are there a couple of misconceptions or that you just constantly run into that you're constantly having to correct?
Well, I think one of the misconceptions actually is this one, in that people see things as black and white, as if things were, Iran was a paradise before, and now suddenly this Islamic revolution had made it into hell. They have brought their own extra repressive things, like forcing the women to wear veil, all those things. Under the Shah, it was voluntary. But attitudes and laws were just as repressive for women then as they are now. That's one misconception, because, as I said, Americans weren't that aware of Iran then, and Shah was just a benign figure.
Yeah.
And so they saw Iran as this rich country with women walking around in fashionable clothes, that they did. But that was deceiving, because though they didn't wear veils and they wore fashionable clothes, they were very repressed. Like if they got a divorce from their husband, the child custody would automatically go to the husband, even if the husband was abusive. Arranged marriage was there, except for a small segment of the population who were much more westernized, and they went against that. That was a very small fragment of people in Tehran. And so, you know, that's a major misconception, in seeing things in this black and white way, as if Iran was, you know, just great then.
Before.
And now it happened this. It has always been repressive for women there, forever and ever.
Do you see yourself as speaking for Iranian women?
Again, not consciously. Like, I don't write. I just write what's urgent to myself. Like, I really want to write a story, or I wanted to write my memoir. But it's not really so much trying to be a representative of my culture as otherwise, because I think that will limit me in the expression of what I write.
Sure.
Because I think if you're too conscious of that, then you have a tendency to do things in black and white. You know, like, because you're trying to prove a point. And I don't think as a writer, that's a very good approach.
No, it's limiting. Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, actually, if you find that are you at all pigeonholed like that? Do you find that that's frustrating?
Well, the frustrating part actually is the kind of, sometimes I get attacks from Iranians that they don't feel I give a good enough name to Iran, because like not all of them obviously, but some feel that if an Iranian writer is writing in this climate where there is so much prejudice against Iran, I should be giving like a much more rosier picture of Iran, much more, you know, favorable in every respect than I give. Whereas I feel I'm just giving realistic details. Like they want like a travelogue type thing, not a realistic novel or a realistic memoir. They want something like more like as if you're writing a travelogue, that you want to give the best features only.
Well, I know that in your novel, Jumping Over Fire, you talk about as well, you know, the difficulties, the family having to escape Iran, and then the difficulties of the son when he comes here, and the father facing prejudice. Actually, do you want to tell us a little bit about the story about
Jumping Over Fire?
Yeah,
Jumping Over Fire, actually, it has this big incest theme between
I wasn't going to mention the incest, but there we go.
Well, that part isn't autobiographical, but the incest theme came to me because I was really interested in seeing how you know, like the sister Nora is so all-American, has taken after American mother, lives in Iran. The brother is very Iranian, even though he's adopted, he still is more Iranian in looks and attitudes and all that. I am very curious to see how a young American girl survives under the repressions in Iran for young girls. And then in turn, how an Iranian boy coming to the United States, particularly under this very prejudiced climate, can possibly get adjusted. That was the grain of the book. And
so you kind of had, you know, double the bang for your buck kind of thing. You're like, okay, we can see her in the wrong place kind of here, and then him dealing with
prejudices here,
and the prejudice
here. And the theme of incest, I thought of it because also, you know, I mean, it just was interesting to me. First of all, incest actually happens a lot in Iran because of these limitations. I mean, because they don't have they are not allowed to go out with boys. Girls, boys don't mingle freely before marriage. So sometimes incest isn't like completely far-fetched or anything. And that was the aim of the incest. I just was thinking, well, how does this young American-seeming girl, American girl really in her heart, she was born here, her mother is American, she's not allowed any of the freedom she sees in the American club where these other, or she sees American movies, she reads American books. She has nobody to turn to as she reaches adolescence for her desires, which are so natural for adolescent girls. And her brother, here he is adopted, as far as they're concerned, he's just an adopted boy. And so they become very attracted to each other. So that was the idea behind it.
It's an interesting tension. This book came out, Jumping Over Fire, in 2006?
Actually 6, yeah, it was 6 months before the other one.
Persian Girls.
Yeah.
Were you
6
writing
months
these
before.
at the same time?
I was writing them at the same time because, because as I said, the memoir was so when I say painful, I was really dealing with very personal things.
Yes.
And so it was very hard to put it all in paper like steadily. Like it was almost hard to take for myself. And so I would set it aside and work on the other book and keep going back and forth. And I found it to be easier.
Yeah. Was there ever a time where you had, 2 computers going and you were working them both at the same time? No,
I didn't do it that way. Like I would work on one for 2-3 months, set it aside, and work on the other one for 2-3 months. I took turns, actually.
It's funny because I see themes, because I read them both pretty much back to back, and I thought, well, there seems to be some crossover, some themes, and I'm like, I think the publication dates are real close. It was like, I found really an interesting way exploring them via the fiction.
Yeah.
And then, also through the experience of
memoir.
Memoir. Do you have another memoir you'll write?
No, I'm writing another novel, actually.
Another one. Well, we look forward to it. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show and talking with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
My guest was Nahid Rachlin, the author of Persian Girls and Jumping Over Fire. Thanks for being with us today.